We are in the rook endgame territory between Vidit Gujrathi and Vasily Ivanchuk here. Ivanchuk pushes his pawn to f6 and Vidit plays his king to f8. He's completely winning here. A check. It's not a mate. The rook comes back. Black is 2 pawns up. And 40th move made here. Rook h1. Vidit needs to make his final move with 19 seconds on the clock here. King e8 seems like the best move. He plays it. Now let's take stock of the situation. Vidit has 2 extra pawns here. Yes, white has an active king and pawn on f6 and an active rook, but it shouldn't be enough to hold this position. c5 played by Ivanchuk. He's hoping to win the b4 pawn from coming here, but Vidit can defend it. And Vidit plays d6 move after 23 minutes of thought, because he got 50 minutes on the clock. And now it's a very nice move, because after cd6 he can play the move c5 here, and he's clearly better in this position. It's winning, but Vidit decides to move the pawn only 1 square. Now Ivanchuk gets an opportunity, which is rook h7 with the idea of d7 check and rook f7 and gaining counterplay, but he misses it. He plays rook a1 here, and rook a1 is losing because of rook g5 check, pushing the king back and swinging the rook over to b5. And Vidit finds it. Rook g5, king f4 played, and now rook to b5 is the winning move, because you put the rook behind the passer, the b passer. Plays his rook to b5. The idea is to push the pawn forward, b3, b2. Rook a8 check played, and now king d7 to take the pawn on d6. Ivanchuk goes rook to f8, and now king d6 is just winning. Even b3 wins. So Vidit on course to victory here. He plays rook takes f7 now, and the best move is b3, pushing the pawn forward. And Vidit finds it. b3 played. He's playing this endgame very well. Close to winning this against the legendary Ivanchuk. Ivanchuk plays his move without any real enthusiasm. He knows he's winning. Now the best move here is king e6. It's a very strong move, and Vidit finds it again. The threat is rook f5, take on f7. Now it's a very key line here that Ivanchuk can play f7. Now look at this. Rook f5 check, king e4, rook f7. By the way, Vidit blunders. This was the winning move. No, he goes rook b8. Rook f5 was winning, but it was a little bit complicated to calculate. He goes back rook b8, but now Ivanchuk has a draw. He can go king e3. And the main point here is that Vidit is making a queen here, but the problem is after b2 comes f8. He pushes b2 and Ivanchuk grabs the queen. Yes, he puts f8. And Vidit shaking his head there. He's missed his opportunity, a huge one. We'll analyze what was winning there. But takes, and now Ivanchuk calmly puts his rook back. And what a move now. This pawn cannot be saved this way nor that way. Vidit, of course, not at all happy here at this. He goes king d5. Is there still some hope? It seems unlikely. He plays rook takes b2. And c5 played, pushing the pawn forward. You go rook to c2. And he goes rook h8. Rook comes back. Perfect play by Ivanchuk. He knows he just has to get his king in here and it will be a draw. Vidit tries to cut the king off on the second rank. Generally, rank cutoffs are very powerful, but here the king is just moving in via d3 to c3. Plays king d3. And check. You can see Ivanchuk's face there. He knows he has the half point in the bag. Just comes back king c2. And well, this is now because the king is in front of the pawn, there's absolutely no way that Vidit can make progress here. He goes king c4 with the idea of a check. And Ivanchuk brings his rook to g1. This is the well-known Philidor position that's going to come into effect, where Vidit will get his king to the third rank. Ivanchuk will cut him off on the third rank. Let's just look at how it will work out. Check. King comes to c1. Look at Ivanchuk playing it so calmly. And now the point is, you bring your rook here, cut the king off. And Vidit so unhappy there because he was winning since so many moves, shaking his head there. The win was a little bit complicated, to be honest. Rook e2, but I believe Vidit might have seen that win, and now the Philidor comes into the picture with rook g3. And I think Ivanchuk, of course, plays it. Now the point to learn here is that when black king cannot come up, right? So he has to use the pawn as a shield. So when king goes to b4, which he plays, and now goes c4, c3, then there is no cover for checks that will come from below. So the checks will start rolling from below here. So rook h3. c4, and just wait there, force him to push the pawn to c3, when you will then start moving from below and start checking. I think Vidit can already accept a draw here. He knows it's a draw, but well, he's playing on out of inertia. Rook h2. Ivanchuk keeps his rook there. Well, it's almost 6th hour of play, and for Vidit, I think the most disheartening part here is the fact that he managed to get a winning position, but in the end botched up in the final few minutes. So that really kind of puts you in not so great mood for the event. But then again, it's just the nature of chess that many winning positions are lost or drawn, and that happens in the top level chess as often as it happens in amateur chess. Rook g2, and look at Ivanchuk there keeping the rook on the third rank. Finally Vidit has to push the pawn now if he wants to make some progress. And he pushes it, pawn to c3. And now it's important to not let the king come in here, So like if you keep waiting, then black wins after king b3. So you have to go downwards, rook f8, and start checking when the king comes to b3. So rook f7, good move, and the checks will happen from the last rank. The silence is just too intense here. Goes rook b2. Ivanchuk plays a check. King goes to a3. Okay, you can even take the rook. I believe that's also completely drawn. Takes, and king b1. It's a stalemate. So Ivanchuk, I guess, debating over what's the best way to draw this position. Just wanting to be sure here. You can see him. He plays rook c7, and I guess it's time to agree to a draw. The players have agreed to a draw here, and of course would be interesting to see what they have to speak to each other, because and let's just look at I think Ivanchuk has a different way to win, and Vidit has a different way to win. So Vidit says king e6. Instead of playing rook b8, I should have gone rook f5, and he puts the position there. It's a very important bit of calculation here. So check, king e5. So he's just setting up the position here. So rook a7, king e6. He's saying go b2, f7, rook check, queen check. So check here and then win the rook and let him queen, and then you are able to win the queen endgame, is what Ivanchuk says. But Vidit maybe has another win. He's like, I can go king e6, f7 and play rook f5 check. King e4, take on f7, rook a6, king d6, rook b6, king c5. And look at him falling there, because now rook b3, king c4, and he has to move, check, king has to move away, and the c pawn just wins, and it's completely winning. So it's a draw, and that was the win.